Welcome to Screen Chat. I'm Neil Bashins, and this is the show where I sit around with friends and talk about film and television and pop culture. This week with me is Ben Vickery. Ben, welcome back again.
Glad to be here.
All right, I'm excited. This has been a show that I've been planning probably since the beginning of the podcast. It was like one of my original ideas of ones that'd be cool to talk about. Today we're talking Indiana Jones. This is such a fantastic character now, since like originally first film came out in 81. So what are we talking there? 91, 2000, like almost 40 years of that character now.
37. Yeah.
And still going strong. Like, it's been across multiple media, like, 3 or 4 films, with possibly more in development. A television show I think it was in the 90s, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Yes, that would have been in the early 90s, I believe.
Comic books, role-playing games, you name it. It has had everything except, I think, like an animated show. But I can't ever, I'm not aware of one, but.
Yeah, I mean, enough animated shows, I'm sure, have done some
riff on it. Yeah. But, so anyways, the character started, it's written by George Lucas, originally conceived of by him, and I guess to hear him tell it, which is not always the most accurate history of his stuff, but supposedly when he was in the early 70s, he had 2 main ideas he wanted to develop, and one was a space adventure, and the other was some kind of an adventuring archaeologist set in like the 30s or 40s, a period piece. And he went down the road of Star Wars, and then decided and then got so wrapped up in doing Star Wars that he decided to then farm this idea out to somebody else. Because as he says it, he just wanted to see the movie, and he, was therefore going to serve as a producer and not hands-on directing and writing. Apparently, anecdotally, I've read this and seen interviews with them enough times that this has got to be true. That when Star Wars was about to hit theaters, George Lucas took off to Hawaii for vacation just to get away from the buzz and whatever. And he was joined by, at the time, friend Steven Spielberg. And the two of them were on vacation together, sitting on a beach in Hawaii. The early returns came in for Star Wars. George could relax. Hey, my thing's a hit. And then started talking. And supposedly Spielberg was telling Lucas how he wanted to do a film like a globe-trotting adventure film. And what he really wanted to do was a James Bond movie. And he wondered if they'd ever let him direct a James Bond movie. To which Lucas came back over the top on him and said, I got a better idea for you. Do this thing. This is an adventuring, world-traveling thing. And Spielberg, and they started talking about it, and that would have been in late 77. Yeah. And they spent the next few years developing the character.
It's hard to try to picture a better film combo, like a film duo to helm this than Spielberg
as creators.
Like,
yeah. I think I've been on record as being that I don't think George Lucas is a fantastic director or even certainly not a good script writer, but as an idea guy and as a producer that knows how to give people the juice to go do a thing and dream big and go, let's make this thing and go. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. The imagination between those two is just mind-blowing at times.
Yeah. So they developed it from there. And so the first script took them a while to get it. I guess they went from 77 and they finally started shooting in 80. Took a couple years through other stuff working on. And Raiders of the Lost Ark came out early. This is a trivia note that I think everybody in the world knows, that many, many names attached to it early on, to the lead character, actually cast and accepted the role Tom Selleck. Did you not know that?
I'm trying to think if I knew that or not.
Are you the last person in the world that knew this?
It's entirely possible.
Tom Selleck was offered and accepted the role.
Yes.
And then CBS, where it was in the season 1 of Magnum P.I., CBS told him he could not take it. And they exercised the option and said, no, you can't take it. It's going to interfere with the shooting schedule of Magnum P.I. At the time, the way they were, the shooting schedule for Raiders for one of them ended up moving. And at the end of the day, Selleck could have taken the role, but CBS wouldn't let him. And history is made. Like,
I think I heard something when Burt Reynolds passed that he had been trying for the role as well.
Really?
I'm trying to remember that.
That one I had not heard.
That could be completely
It could
wrong,
be. It was offered to a ton of people, or considered by a ton of people at the time. A lot of names thrown in the hat. But the most reliable one is that Tom Selleck was actually cast and had to turn it down. And then Spielberg wanted to put Harrison Ford in there, and George Lucas was initially resistant to the idea because he had him in Star Wars, and so he didn't want to use him in too many of his projects. And Spielberg wore him down and said, "No, like Harrison's the guy." And
I mean,
hard to imagine anybody else in the role or how that would have been different.
That's a tough one because that character. I mean, Harrison's kind of made him very gruff and kind of standoffish, but at the same time, excitable and he does such a great job. I think just in the first one alone of just that, and even in Last Crusade where you see him out in the field and then you see him all bookish.
Yep.
In the classroom.
The dichotomy in his character.
Yeah, and the fact that he's actually telling people archaeology is mostly done, on paper and in libraries. It's not X never marks the spot.
Yeah, they say that line later on as a setup for a gag. But yeah.
So they've really, everything about that character has been really well thought out.
And for an outrageous, big screen adventure character that is by no means a real life person, very believable. In both roles, you believe him as being this tough guy, and he was. A lot of people will sometimes offer up John McClane from Die Hard as the first action character we saw that could get his ass kicked. That was, in the 80s, I guess. I'm trying to think back to the 70s, how action heroes were. But in the 80s, very much, we had these indestructible characters like Stallone and Schwarzenegger. And people often say, well, John McClane was the first, action hero that got his ass kicked. But I'm kind of like, Indiana Jones got his ass kicked a lot, too.
Yeah, I mean, all the time. It was always, the one classic line is, I believe, from Last Crusade was, once again, Dr. Jones, there is nothing that you cannot have that I cannot take from you.
That's from Raiders.
Is that from Raiders?
That's from Raiders.
Okay.
That's Belloc says that too.
Okay, yeah. I watched them so close together just in the last week that they're kind of blending. But yes, you're right. That was Belloc and Raiders, and just perfect example.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love the film.
No.
Well, no.
It was Last Crusade because it was the cross. Wasn't
then
it?
Then they repeat the line.
Oh, they
because
did
Belloc takes the idol from him in the beginning of Raiders in the opening, in the cold open scene, and then he's looking down at him in the Well of the Souls at the end of Raiders, and he's like, so once again, Dr. Jones, we see there's nothing you have which I cannot take away.
Okay, because I think they do that with the cross.
Then
when
maybe
he's a
it's a callback to the guy, and he says, this is the second time I've had to reclaim my property from you. Is what he says. That guy says in that beginning of that film.
I think that is the one. The line that I'm thinking of is this is the second time I've had to reclaim my property from you.
And just there, we referenced things that happen in the cold. I could, I guess it's a industry term, maybe, I don't know. The cold open, referencing something in a movie or a television show, the opening segment that has little or nothing to do with the rest of the adventure. It's just sort of to get you in. It's a quick start to get the action going right away, and with new things to introduce you to a character,
and to set up history between characters.
Exactly, and that is something that is done, and very notably in the Bond franchise. So right there, as saying a few minutes ago there, that Steven Spielberg wanted to make a Bond film. He has said on many occasions that these were like his Bond films, and he very much followed a lot of their pattern of, going to a place, having an action sequence, finding a new thing out, and then going to another exotic location and traveling. So, and with the cold open is another format thing that they took from the Bond films and did it, and it really works awesome. The first one here, here's a small note: the actor that plays one of the guys along with him to find that idol is I just lost his name off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can never remember his name.
Alfred Molina.
That's what it is. Alfred.
So the Alfred Molina played like a small role there, and the guy that ends up with the spiders all over his back, and then tries to double cross him in the temple there. So super exciting opening.
Let me ask you a question about the whole Raiders thing. I mean, people talk about Indiana Jones, and I assume most people know that the first movie is not Indiana Jones. It's just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, do you think that's because they were planning on doing it as a one-off, or did they not have a ton of faith in it to do
the idea of calling it Indiana Jones and the blah 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 was just, I don't think it was, it wasn't a thing early on. It was just it was probably genuine because it's the franchise has its spiritual origins or roots in old serialized adventure stories from the 30s and 40s that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were both fans of growing up. They talk about. So the idea, and it's totally left open, that, okay, if this is successful, we can probably have more adventures. In fact, I think Steven Spielberg has talked that it was supposed to be 5. At one point they had talked about that they were going to make 5 adventures of it. And we can get into how that worked out later on. But I just think they were just going to title it. And then so when they came to the second one, the character had become so popular. And I think that just the name Indiana Jones had become a thing etched in pop culture. And so they titled the second one Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I think that's probably also somewhat a callback. I could stand to be corrected, but a lot of the old serials had titles like that, like, whatever the name was, and this or that. Yeah.
And that's what another question I was going to ask was did they kind of make that naming system mainstream? Because from that point on, you've got
they've probably revived it
and all those.
I don't know.
Then
you'd have to ask J.K. Rowling that, but I think so. I think they did that with the second one, and then when they did it with the third one, it then became a thing they were doing in the series.
Yeah.
And then when they released one of the box sets, I think in the early 2000s, some marketing people decided to retroactively rebrand it as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I'm like, no. No, it's not. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark. No. So whatever. People can call it whatever they want. I don't know why you would want to rebrand a thing backwards like that. It's not like anybody doesn't know this is the Indiana Jones, but it's just a thing they do.
Yeah.
They kind of I guess they homogenize out the marketing. They also sometimes go back in any of the newer material, the cover art you see in the posters are not the original posters. They developed, the later films came up with adapted or adopted a style that, again, they retroactively went back and made a poster for Raiders of the Lost Ark that aped that was in that style.
So the poster that comes to my mind for Raiders is him with his shirt torn open and the whip and the hat, right?
That's the redone. That's a new poster. That's a new poster. Okay. The earlier ones are more like it's a large Indy with his leather jacket on, and then around in a similar style, there's smaller action, like there's sort of like action scenes around him, but it's not really like that. That poster, I'm pretty sure I could stand to be corrected. It's too bad we don't have Warren here today because he'd probably be pretty history knowledgeable on that. But I think that was a later poster done up.
Okay.
It's possibly it's sometimes thrown on, or it's often thrown onto lists as one of the greatest adventure films ever.
I'd definitely put it up there.
I would have trouble disagreeing with that. Fantastic stunts, lots of action. I can't really think of a slow moment in it. It's always kind of moving. It's always got stuff going. I can have it on in the background sometimes. I've watched it, I think, 3 times in the past 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I only originally intended to watch it once for the podcast, but it's one I've seen many, many times. But then I was like, I'm going to watch it again because I really had a good time with that. And then I watched it again yesterday. So
it was something I was discussing with some friends the other day that the Raiders movie is, especially given the time that it was made, like, 81, and considering the era it was reflecting, it's surprisingly fairly modern. Like, it ages well. You get a lot of these movies that don't age well, where you kind of watch it and you go, ooh.
You're talking about like in terms of social sensibilities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Raiders had a very strong female character who was relatively self-capable and
absolutely. Karen Allen playing Marion. I was just going to bring that up too. That's sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. So it's on top of that, just the attitudes. I mean, the dress, the cars, everything is very much of the time, but the attitude of almost everybody in that movie is very
Marion kicks butt. She's not just there to be a damsel. Yeah. Like there's definitely those parts in where he goes to rescue her, but she's right in there like punching dudes out and taking care of problems and whatever. So she's a very she has agency in her character.
They save each other back and forth a few times throughout that thing. And then, in trying to save one
she's
another,
his equal. She doesn't just sit back and wait for him to get saved and by no means is like a shrinking violet.
Now,
Indy.
Having said that, you go to Temple.
It does not carry forward.
Oh,
so we might as well move forward now. We'll take the jump forward now into Indiana Jones: The Temple of Doom, 1984. 3 years later, a much different tone, darker tone. I've seen a lot of people describe it as mean-spirited. It's got things in it that could be construed as racist or borderlining on very stereotyping and racial. I guess we'll jump right in and say that the character of Willie Scott in the second one is not. Oh, she's a completely different character.
Having rewatching it, it's I mean, especially when you look at that versus all the other ones. The difference is mind blowing.
It definitely steps aside from the other of the first trilogy. It definitely stands out, or is the one that sets apart and is different. I've seen or read interviews where supposedly George Lucas and Steven Spielberg have both chalked it up to both of them at the time were not in the happiest of places. They were both had just gotten divorced, and Spielberg says he made a bit of a darker tone, and he says it got away from him, that it got darker than he wanted it to be.
You know what? I have all the respect for him to be able to come out and say something like that.
I think he's pretty honest about stuff like that.
I mean, it definitely doesn't. It's not as fun. It's not as freewheeling. The adventure portion. It's more. It's not adventure so much as it is just constant peril.
It is, and it basically is in one spot. After the cold open, they go to India, and the whole thing basically takes place in India. They go to the village, but then they travel to the temple, and the whole rest of the film just takes place.
Very little red line travel.
It does not have the world travel or the exotic locations and everything from the first film. A lot darker and more sinister. This was the first one I saw in theater. And probably the only one of the original trilogy, the only one I saw in its original run. My dad took me and my brother, so I would have been 10, he would have been 8, coming 9 maybe. I don't remember it being all that terrifying to me. I'm just excited by watching it, but it is definitely more. Horrific is not a great word for it, but it's got much darker leanings. Yeah, it's. Some of the ideas apparently were for action set pieces were reused. They were ideas abandoned for Raiders. Okay. The mine cart was supposed. There was a different kind of a sequence worked out where to escape from. I think it was supposed to be when they were in Egypt. There would be a mine there. The mine cart sequence was thing that Spielberg had mined.
The mine cart was actually that was enjoyable. It was fun. I mean, you can see that reflected in a few other movies. Later on and. I just drew a blank as to what. There was one in my head that just stood out. I mean, even video games, Donkey Kong Country used a lot of mine parts in it.
I remember being part of the Temple of Doom video game. Was a really cool game where you had to drive the mine cart. I remember that, playing an arcade game when I was a kid. But
The Rock.
The Rock.
In The Rock, they're on the carts and he's hanging from the thing, right? He uses the lighter fluid to...
sort of. Yeah, I can kind of see that, sort of. Yeah. Much more, I keep saying more sinister here. The villain was pretty evil. That dude that played Mola Ram was pretty scary.
Yes.
Apparently he was, previous to that, he had basically been always, more of a they found him from Indian cinema, from Bollywood. I don't know Bollywood necessarily, but from Indian cinema. And apparently he had generally played good guys before that, and he shaved his head for this.
Really?
Played that character, and then ever after found a whole career renaissance, supposedly playing villains because he was so scary. And
he was pretty. Yeah, I mean, the Thuggies and all that. It was excellent villains, but
this film is Temple of Doom is sort of credited to say, I guess, along with Gremlins, as being the two films that are largely responsible for why the Motion Picture Association of America created the rating of PG-13. Oh. Previous to this, there was PG, and then it jumped right to R. And both, I think there was a few things in Raiders that kind of got them a little bit tweaked. In the end of Raiders, the iconic, the head, the face melting was okay. It was Belloc's head exploding that apparently they didn't like. So then they went back and optically added in flames to obscure it a bit, and that got them a PG rating. But then this film was very dark, and again, they made them use fire a couple times to obscure some things. And some of the more horrible things in Gremlins, or like the scarier things, and Spielberg produced Gremlins, and that then Spielberg, I'm forgetting the name of who the president of the MPAA was at the time, but Spielberg went and talked to him and eventually and proposed to him that they create a rating system that would fall between PG and R.
Well, that's a big later on zone to cover.
Well, nowadays I guess it is, but back then, they never really thought they didn't really have much
PG. So this is your swing is if it's not good for a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old, then it's not good for a 17-year-old can't handle it. That's a big.
It is,
it's a big age group.
Yeah. Anyways, so they burned through this one, and then I don't like. When I watched it, I'm not like super. Like I know some people are really turned off by it. I'm watching it, and maybe it's just because I had that childhood memory of seeing it with my dad and my brother that maybe I have a little bit of nostalgia for it, but because I can totally see the things they're saying, and Willie is just very annoying and screamy.
Her character, I think, is kind of most of this movie is kind of it's just a miss for what the rest of the franchise is like. One of the things I really appreciated about this was they went out of the Judeo-Christian relics. They said, we're going to try something different. And personally, I'd like to see more of that. And I think we can touch more on that in a little bit. But I like that they took some chances on this movie. I mean, there were near misses and maybe a few far misses on this movie. And easily of the first three, my least favorite. Just because it's not in the same vein as any of the rest of them,
Yeah.
So
Steven Spielberg ended up marrying Kate Capshaw, who plays Willie Scott, and he has said many times in interviews that the only really good thing to come out of Temple of Doom was that he found his wife.
Yeah, because they're still married, aren't they?
Yep, yeah. To this day. Yep. So
I get that.
All right, and then from there we went moving on, and we jump ahead to 1989. Then they moved 5 years before we got another adventure, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and very much back to form.
Yes.
You'd almost say more to form even than Raiders. That I think, even though Raiders is the first one, I think you hit Last Crusade, and it's kind of like they've now perfected it. They found the perfect amount of balance of humor versus adventure versus danger and suspense and stuff.
This movie was as close to perfect as I think you can get a movie. All the characters, the interaction between them. I mean, the casting of Sean Connery as his father was...
Again, hearkening back to the Bond thing, that I guess supposedly George Lucas initially hesitant to cast Connery, saying everybody's going to look at that and see James Bond. And Spielberg says he argued back, saying, I created Indiana Jones in my mind or in my heart to be the son of James Bond anyways, so if he can come and play his father, this is just a personal bit of bringing it home for me. So, yeah. Perfectly cast.
Yeah. Beautifully cast.
They had great chemistry together.
Oh, did they ever?
Yeah.
I mean, just the moments where Sean Connery is exerting his authority, or Henry Jones, I should say, is exerting his authority, and the way that Harrison Ford is just able to snap to, and yes, sir, and just... and then the casting of River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones
in the cold open sequence
was, again, beautifully done. Everything looked really well. I loved the origin of the snake sphere.
Yeah.
Because he was fine with them before, and then all of a sudden this one thing, it's like, okay, traumatic experience, perfect.
Yeah.
The origin of the scar on the chin, with the whip, finding the whip, and then that cut scene, of having the hat put on him, and then looking up and
it was a great cut
boat.
scene. Yeah. I'm gonna say that thinking on it, like when I watched it the other way, I'm like. It was almost, and it's a fun adventure film, so I'm going to give it the pass on this. But to have four explanations of these four things of the character, behaviors or things he has, all sandwiched into one 5-minute, sequence of his life, I was like, really?
Well, and it's great. I think it's really great because it really shows the importance of that period in his life. That he's right at his formative years. And these things,
one event gave him everything.
Just really, this was the crucible that formed him into the ingot from the ore that he was. And I'm like, I thought it was a great way to tie all these disparate, like, where would a guy with archaeology knowledge and like, oh, his dad, now you see why he gets this history knowledge, and then how would he come across a whip and then be afraid of snakes, and why would he pick that hat? And like, it just to show these weird things and how they amalgamated together, I thought was just so much fun.
It is a fun thing.
So much fun.
We get back to having a female character who is not just a wallflower there to be saved. Alison Doody plays Elsa.
Yeah,
something or other. I've lost her last name here. Yeah, she's
Dr.
Schneider.
Schneider.
And she's a different kind of aggressive or of tough character in here. Not plays an ally, but then ends up being the enemy. So
great
she double crosses him, and she's not just like great motivations and believable, and it's entertaining.
Yeah, she pushes that I'm on your side, and your father and this and that, and then just the betrayal is beautiful in that. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. The film, like you said, it's almost perfect. It flows really well. There's no slow spots. We're back to just like with Raiders. I felt that I can just watch it and it just goes from one to another, where I can sit down thinking I'm going to watch 10 or 15 minutes of this, but each scene goes into the next. I'm just going to stick around for one more and one more and one more. Sorry, jumping back for a second to Temple of Doom. I did like the callback. We're all over the place today. Everybody, I'm going to have to apologize to the audience. I'm like, not majorly, but minorly hungover from a holiday party, so my brain is not fully into gear. I did like the callback where when from the first film, the sword, when he duels with the swordsman, and just takes him out with a gun, they then called that back in Temple of Doom, that he has two swords guys, and he goes to pull out his gun, but he lost his gun earlier in the film, so now he does actually have to slug it out with these guys. Where was my brain going? Did they do a similar thing in here? Not really. No, they didn't do that callback again.
No. It was they really, for the comedy, and that they really invested in the father son and the issues that they had between the two of them. I mean, when he breaks through the window and gets smashed on the head with the glass or with the vase, and then suddenly Dad's all broken up and he realizes, no, it's a fake. Nazis come through the door, Dad, and then he keeps calling him Junior, and then he shoots all the guys. And
I liked seeing John Rhys Davies back. Sala was really fantastic.
His character, that was a wonderful character.
Yeah. Denholm Elliott is back as well as Marcus Brody. A little goofier this time. His character tweaked a little bit to kind of be this daffy guy that's gets lost in his own museum.
Well, I think it also reflects the age, because I believe he passed away.
This was his last film.
Yeah, he passed away in 92, or was it 2002?
No, I think it was
92.
92, because it was not long after the film. This was his last film.
Yeah. So I think it was also to relate the age, like it's been 10 years, and I think it shows them all aging just a little bit. So
yeah, but one thing I found, I will say, weird and off-putting, that if I could say there's one thing to clip out of here, and I don't know why they do it, is when they go to get the Grail diary that Sean Connery's character, Henry Jones, has been, compiling over decades, and what helps them solve the mystery and track everything down. When they're in Germany, they have a gag where Indy comes face to face with Hitler, and Hitler autographs the book. And I'm like, why are we portraying Hitler? What's that scene even do? Like, what does that part of that scene do?
I think it adds a little bit of that tension release of going into Germany, like you're going into the heart of the lion there, the lion's den.
I think we had that, but I felt really... I'd never had this in the past, but when I was watching it this time through about 2 weeks ago, I was like, why are we... why meet Hitler? It just seems weird. It almost seems weird.
I think it's also a little bit of maybe almost political commentary.
Is it?
To he gets pushed up against the leader of this movement that is all about burning books, and he takes this book that is literally the most important thing that he needs and wants, and it just kind of, I think it's a comment on the ignorance of fascism, of burning books without regard. To just I feel like it's, when I was younger I'd never thought that, but having rewatched it recently, I think it's maybe a little bit of a jab at
something in there. Steven Spielberg putting in a little something.
Yeah, just saying like, here he is, this guy who's pushing this movement of hatred, and he really doesn't have a clue as to what's really going on. And I personally, that's kind of what I got. I got a little tension release and this little kind of
I'll go with that.
Little social commentary.
I can go with that. Yeah. Another thing thing here, you get to the end and they got the 3 tests they have to pass, and that harkens back. I think every entry in the series, it's always, they crack me up as I was watching them again. They have these incredibly elaborate like Rube Goldberg contraption traps built by like ancient civilizations, and they've been sitting there for like hundreds of years waiting for somebody to trip them.
Thousands of years.
And they still work.
Yeah. like you made these with ropes. Those ropes wouldn't have lasted 100 years.
They would have rotted out and be gone. The invisible bridge, sort of like, because the forced perspective of like, I'm like, holy, like it's cool, but I'm like, I was laughing at them a little bit.
Yeah.
Similar to like the idol temple in the first one, that when like an ancient thing would be that weight sensitive, and it triggers this whole temple to get destroyed. But yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think that's the moment of disbelief. You have to suspend your disbelief.
They are,
for a
and
moment.
these films by no means ever are trying to pretend that they are walking around in the real world. They're not like trying to be. No. And this could almost happen. Like no, they are outrageous.
Yeah.
So yeah, we burned through that.
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
This is the point where I want to talk about just a little more in depth about the fact that, Temple of Doom really tried to go away from the Judeo-Christian relics. Last Crusade brings it right back.
Hard turn back into it. Yep.
And I mean, it's great. I think it's fantastic. But at the same time, I mean, you kind of prove that other relics are real.
Mm-hmm.
You're now proving that, the Ark was real. The last cup, or the cup of Christ is real. The Holy Grail. That's what I blanked on it for a second. You're trying to prove that all these things are real. I would love to see some other mythos. Roman, Norse, Thor's hammer.
Some magical thing, another kind of a...
Yeah, some mystical thing and something else. Mm-hmm. Let's really make this about archaeology as a whole, not just Judeo-Christian, artifacts. Let's really go out and follow some legends and some myths. Something else. The Golden Fleece.
Yep.
Right? Let's try to prove that, or see if that's real. Let's, I think, and this will lead us into the next one. I think in Crystal Skull, they tried to go outside, and again, they just, instead of that hard left that they took at Temple, they took this hard right, and it's
way away.
Ooh.
Yeah, I guess we might as well step into there. We now jump. I think this came out. I think Crystal Skull's 2008. Is it 10 years old now?
Something around.
Yeah,
there,
I think it's 2008. I forgot to write the date down here. And yeah, this is we had not seen it in a while. Everybody, I think, got busy doing other things, but also, and I've never heard this, like, they don't really talk about it in interviews now. But I remember reading in like the infancy of the internet. I remember reading early stories that like Lucas had slipped, and I don't know if I've invented this over time in my own brain, that the idea of, because in this one they go looking, they find like aliens, and it's implied or basically said that Dr. Jones, Indiana Jones, was like involved. He was recruited by the government, and brought to Roswell to study the UFO, the crashed UFO, and they play into Area 51 and Roswell and all that stuff. And it's like, I remember hearing that like long time before this was ever in development, and I think and this was definitely a George Lucas idea. And it's not like they don't want to bag on their friend, but I'm pretty sure that Spielberg and Harrison Ford were resistant to this idea for a long time and just sort of caved in because they were all kind of going, we're all getting kind of old, and one of these days we won't be able to do this anymore, so if we want to do it again together, we have to go now, and now we better take this script. So I did not like the idea.
Okay, so things I liked about this movie. I liked the idea of bringing Marion back. I liked the idea of illegitimate son. I liked that. I liked going after a different object. I believe crystal skulls were a big thing for the decade previous to this movie coming out. They were in the news a lot, and they were on the what existed as social media back then. I liked a lot of that. I liked, let's try something different with it. What I didn't like was some of the casting. Shia LaBeouf was a mistake, but he was hot at the time, right? So you have to, Hollywood wants to strike that iron. I didn't like Aliens. It felt untrue to the character and the overall arc. Let's go fantastic, but we're not. And I mean, it especially goes directly against Raiders and Last Crusade, because those are Judeo-Christian, and you're basically saying God is real, so he created man. How can there be aliens, right? It's kind of doesn't really follow in with that. But I did appreciate them at least trying something different. I didn't like. There was too many points of suspension of disbelief in that one. Too many.
To your point, I'll quickly just address to your point of them not having a consistency in their world they've created from film to film over what's real. Is the Judeo-Christian God real, and making this blah blah. I think each adventure is not unlike, again, I guess tie this back to James Bond again. I think each adventure, they're all Indiana Jones, and they loosely connect, but they could all be different. That they don't have to necessarily reflect each other, and they could be like.
Well, and another thing you could also say is okay, yes, God is real, but these gods are real too. Like all the gods are real.
I was not raised. Real. I wasn't raised religious at all, so I had no background. They didn't do Sunday school or church, nothing at all. So I had no theological background to even read into these movies. So when I watched them, when I was very young, I did not. Like Raiders, I did not get what the Lost Ark was, and to me, God was just an abstract idea of a thing that was a thing for people that I was not involved with. As an adult, I look back at them, I go, okay, yeah, they are informing, like you said, those Christian things into it. But I think they're just using that as a template.
Well, and I'm not saying not saying they're using it as like a indoctrination or anything. I'm just saying, you're pursuing a certain a certain narrative.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was raised with none of that as well. So at the time I watched it, I didn't think anything of it. But then watching Crystal Skull, I went, wait a second, because like 2008, I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, huh. Just kind of,
all
right, so maybe you're not trying to do an arc, but at the same time, you kind of got to think about that.
I was just more overwhelmed. And, I rewatched it again recently, and, I still did not like it, but I hated it in the theater. I was like, man, they should not have done. I wish they just wouldn't have even done it.
Oh, I violently hated it the first time I saw it, but now I'm like, okay, I just don't like it.
So now, supposedly I mentioned earlier that supposedly there was going to be 5 of them, and at some point in the 80s, that was the idea, was that they would make 8 or 5 of them, and every couple of years they would make another one, and then either everybody got busy, or they couldn't agree on getting back together, or they became too expensive to make. And so now there's still, apparently, as of 2018, late 2018, they're still trying to develop. It got recently pushed off a few months ago. And things in Hollywood all the time, studios and people that have nothing to do with the creatives announce often things like, here, this is our slate of movies, and it's just things that are in random development. So I don't know how close it actually is to going, but now it's been pushed off to like 2021 or some 2022 or something. I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it still says 2021. Yeah. I would like to see it happen as a passing of the torch.
We can get back. We'll get back to that in a few minutes. Sure. We'll talk about what the future of it should be. I'm going to nitpick, and I guess people could say it's very nitpicky and not liking it. And there is I've found a community of people online that do like this film and defend it for the things that we'll say are stupid. I will say, to me, I don't know. I've never heard this. Too many people debate this point, but it says in there, like, there's some lines and some dialogue to say that Indiana Jones was brought to Roswell, where the UFO crashed.
Yes.
Why is an archaeologist brought to study a crashed UFO?
From what I remember of the line, it's basically he and another group of scientists were brought in to examine this to see if any of them had any input, but they were given no chance to really.
He's an archaeologist.
You know what? I think. I mean, me personally, if I got something crazy like that, I'm going to bring in an expert from as many fields as possible to see if there's anything on there. Because, I mean, who knows? Maybe that thing crashes. Maybe that silver cocoon thing that it was on, maybe there's Norse runes all over it. Maybe there's Egyptian hieroglyphics. Okay. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen.
We'll let that one slip. I think one of the worst ones, and it probably set me off the film early. The fridge. Nuke the fridge. This is a thing in a film that is so horrible that it took for a while, people changed the old expression of jumping the shark for when a television series or a film series, got past itself and had now become ridiculous, that it had either outlived its own entertainment value or just gone so far ridiculous that it just no longer was true to itself. Yeah, nuking the fridge. Oh my God! He gets in that fridge when a nuclear bomb about to go off and blows through the air.
Yeah, two problems with it. Number one, radiation. Mm-hmm. Number two,
but they show it says lead lines, so that lets it off, right?
Yeah, right. Number two is, as you said, that thing gets sent like 100 feet. It
flies thousands of feet through the air, crushes, and he just rolls out of it and dusts himself off. And I'm like, yeah, okay, he's been through some pretty ridiculous things in this series.
He'd be tapioca after that.
But it's like, and it's dumb, and it's like the only thing that comes flying out of there. Like, where's all the other fridges from the other houses flying out? It's like the one and it's just stupid.
It pulls you out so quickly.
I've heard people argue going, is this really fundamentally any less ridiculous than in Temple of Doom, where they jump out of a plane with a life raft instead of a parachute and somehow land and don't get squashed? And I'm like, well, that is ridiculous that happens in Temple of Doom, but this is, and like completely unrealistic, but this is like so much more.
In defense of the Temple of Doom life rafting, there is at least one documented case of somebody falling out of a plane at 30,000 feet without a parachute and surviving the fall.
I think I've heard about a lady or something that fell out.
And
somehow miraculously landed.
She landed on a hill at the right angle, and it was like really soft, loamy earth.
I've heard this too, but I heard this in like the pre-internet era. So I'm not even sure that this is a real thing. But
from what I remember,
anecdotally,
from what I can recall, it was actually real. But there was a lot of things. She did break, I think, a leg and an arm, but relatively minor injuries considering.
To this point, it's just this is so much like so exponentially more stupid, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, it pulled me out so quickly.
And I think it just set me off the rest of the film. That then I didn't like. Yeah, like I didn't like Shia LaBeouf as that character. I didn't.
His portrayal of the character was seriously over the top. It was too much.
And in contrast to the fact that Harrison Ford in his 70s was still running around being an action hero and doing that, the things they're having him do, he's just too tough for an old guy, and it just becomes. I'm just like, it's like watching somebody's grandpa beat people up, and I'm like, I don't like this. This is not. If you could have done a passing of the torch where there was an acceptable younger character and he could have just been the side, but then it's not really, an Indiana Jones movie. At the end of the day, I didn't like there's bad CG in it that I don't know if that was it up to snuff 10 years ago? Because I remember thinking in the theater it didn't look great.
Was that
the quality of the time?
Yeah. I don't recall even rewatching it now. There's not a lot of moments where I look at the CG and go, "Oh, that's terrible."
Okay, maybe I'm just really getting nitpicky on it.
Honestly, like Raiders, with the only scene in that one that I notice is the giant stone ball. Mm-hmm. And I mean, okay, yeah, limitations of 1981 technology, but even still, the rest of that movie is so well done. But I think more practical effects is special. No,
something really weird struck me at the end of this too. Like when they're doing the post scene, whatever, or like not post credit scene, but like at the end when Indy and Marion get married, and then the church door blows open, and it blows the fedora down the aisle, so that Shia LaBeouf picks it up, but then Harrison Ford takes it out of his hands. Not yet. Okay, symbolically, yeah, this is the time to pass the torch. You're looking old there, Harry. But why does the church door blow? Like, was that? As I watched it again, I'm trying to be like, at the time, I guess when I saw it in theater, I didn't care. By that point, I just wanted it to end because I wanted to get out and throw up my popcorn. And by mean throw up, I mean puke. But why is it? Like, why does that watching it now? I'm like, are they trying to say?
I think
what is it supposed to be?
I think it really pushes just towards the reality of the supernatural again. Like it.
But
pushes,
for what point? Like, is there a thing in there I missed? Like, are they? Is it? I don't know. Like,
no, I just think it's. There's a destiny. There's.
He could have just picked the hat up off the ground or something, but the door blows open pretty dramatically, and I'm like, did they cut something that I missed, or did I just keep tuning this movie out?
To me, it just goes, okay, there's a special destiny here, you know. There's something going on. There's something guiding this. That to me falls in line with the rest of the.
It was
movies.
not Shia LaBeouf's guiding destiny to become Indiana Jones Jr. because that did not carry on or go on at all from there. So rolled that divisive at the very least. I thought at the time, nobody liked it outside of very isolated people. But then,
what you telling me?
Like I said, I found this online community of people that there are people that say it's not that bad.
I never knew that anybody really cared for this movie until you told me that, and
I think
at first it was initial shock, and then it's like, okay, I could see.
I think there's a middle ground, and they tend to be I don't know, but they tend to be younger people that maybe we grew up and because we grew up with it, we had more nostalgia for it. So this thing is really not. And we're kind of like, this is different than our thing. And they're kind of like, they grew up with it. And they're like, is it really that bad? So I think there's maybe a middle.
There
might be a middle ground.
Fans too.
I don't know. There's a middle ground there, I think, where it's probably not, honestly, it's probably not as bad as we think it is. But I don't think it's as good as some other people would make it out to be. That we do give it a hard time because the bar's been set high.
I'm fully willing to admit that. I mean, when you look at the 4, as far as I'm concerned, it's easily the worst.
Yeah.
But having gone back and rewatched it now, I think that the gap between Temple and Crystal Skull is a lot smaller than it was when I first saw Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crystal Skull has come up a little bit for me, but
I don't even really if I were going to watch Raiders movies, I would if I was ever going to have a watch party, I would disinclude it. I would be like,
that's fair.
Yeah, I'd be like, we're watching 3 films.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I'm sure there's people out there.
I mean, I will for them. I'll watch 2. The first and the third all day.
Yeah.
Every day. I'll watch those forever. But 2's okay. I should revisit that.
Let's go ahead and rank them.
Okay.
Go for it.
I gotta say, Last Crusade is probably my number 1.
Okay.
And then Raiders, and then Temple,
and then Temple.
Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough.
I've been struggling because I knew I was going to want to do this and I'm torn between the without Raiders there is nothing else. I'm going to say, I'm going to say Raiders number 1. I'm going to say I like it best just because it is original, and I'm going to acknowledge that with the caveat that I think that in Last Crusade they had perfected the formula and added a few new things like Sean Connery as the father, and that was a great relationship, and it's. Yeah, I don't know, but I still think I like Raiders the best.
I was 4 when Raiders came out, so that's not something I saw in the theater.
Yeah, I didn't see it in theater initially. I saw it on TV, on home video, and then saw Temple of Doom in theater. Somehow, and it's bizarre to say, for a film guy, I did not see Last Crusade in its original theatrical run. I've seen it subsequently in theater a few years ago. But
I'm pretty sure Last Crusade was the only one I actually saw in theater.
Okay. So I would say I'm going to call them, I like Raiders best, and then I like Last Crusade just slightly behind, and you might even, if you catch me on a different day, I might have a different answer.
Those 2 are so close.
Yeah.
It's so close that
Temple of Doom 3rd. I don't think I put it as far behind as other people, and like I said, I don't know. Maybe that's because of my aforementioned that I have sort of a nostalgic connection because it was, I don't remember going to tons of movies when I was a kid with my parents, and oddly enough, they'd be it'd be Temple of Doom and E.T. and Superman and the original Star Trek. And then when I got older, like I went to movies with my dad later on. But growing up, we didn't go to a ton. Once they invented home video, Ghostbusters was when we saw.
Yeah.
But so I have a sort of connection to those films sometimes, except for E.T., which is a whole other show. But so yeah, I don't think I put Temple of Doom as far behind as most people do. Even though I can acknowledge all those things about it, that yeah, it probably is a little bit racist and mean-spirited. But yeah, it was not bad.
I'm actually pretty sure I saw Last Crusade in the drive-in.
Oh, that's awesome. I miss drive-ins.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
But Crystal Skull probably, and I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe even a little bit unfairly further behind. I think it's horrible, but in researching and reading some of and I listened to a couple other podcasts of people defending it, and I'm going, you know what? I don't agree with their reasoning, but I can sort of see it. Like, I can see their point, even if I don't agree with it. I can acknowledge their points. Weird trivia time. Let's throw it out. I've forgotten there was some trivia bits along the way I wanted to throw out, and because I was shocked you didn't know the Tom Selleck one.
I'm pretty weak on Indiana Jones.
An additional one's of the Tom Selleck one. Do you know the connection through the Tom Selleck connection? Or as part of it ties in with Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers from Disney?
Yeah, they were modeled after Magnum P.I. and Indiana Jones.
Yeah. And Tom Selleck, so you kind of had that connection of Tom Selleck almost played Indy, but was stuck playing.
That makes that even funnier.
I think that's awesome. So I keep looking for, like, if they have a Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers Funko Pops in those two outfits, I'd like to get them from my collection, but only those two. So yeah, there's that. Spielberg acknowledges that he knew Temple of Doom was getting too dark, and then he tried to inject humor into it. There's things like during the fight in the mines near the end, the big goon that's beating up Indy tosses a sledgehammer over his shoulder, and then it bonks some dude in the head and just kind of comedically knocks him out. And to me, it was, and Spielberg said he was doing a few things like that to try to inject humor to lighten it. And when I was hitting those, I'm like, oh, like, I think the tone is too dark, but now I'm feeling like tonally off here. It was getting weird. Another really weird trivia note, during the filming of Last Crusade, the scene where they're in, like, the airship trying to leave Germany before the plane chase, they shot on a sound stages, I think at Elstree in London, and it was very hot in the soundstage, so Sean Connery took his pants off because they were being shot from the waist up. And apparently at first Harrison Ford was off-put by it, and he's like, dude, it's hot in here, take your pants off. So supposedly Harrison Ford took his pants off, and I was like, you're right, it is more comfortable. The two of them sat there with no pants on doing the scene.
I could 100% see that being a thing that would happen.
Yeah, that was weird.
Harrison Ford is kind of a weird dude, and Sean Connery strikes me as kind of a weird dude as well.
Yeah, so that was kind of wacky there. Anyways, moving on here. Gonna get into something else. I guess you didn't know this thing existed before I tuned you into it, or not the documentary at least?
I didn't know the actual documentary existed. I knew that these kids had done this.
I'm gonna pull up. I wrote down their names because I wanted to not mess these guys out of credit. And I've lost where their names are written down here. They're on the next page. In the 80s, 1982. 3 kids at the time, they would have been, I think, like between 9 and 11. And their names were, I think it's Eric Zala, Chris Strompoulos, and Jason Lamb. And these kids in the States, I think in Mississippi, saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in theater. Loved it so much that they decided to make a shot-for-shot remake of the film on their own. This is absolutely amazing. I don't recall if I'd heard of it before, but then I found this. The documentary is currently on Netflix. It's called Raiders, the story, the real story of the greatest fan film ever made. These kids, like, starting from when they were 11 through when they were 19, they spent 7 summers making this thing. So when you watch it, they change. I've never been able to see the whole thing. I can't find it online. I'd love to, but you see them change in age. They look older. Their voices change. All the actors change. But they recreated at the time. Like, Raiders came out before, like, the explosion of home video, so they did not have a home video release. They worked off at this kid Eric Zala, or he's a grown man now, older than me, but as a kid, sat there and drew storyboards and they managed to cobble together the entire film from memory, from, like, watching it once or twice and from reading the comic book, or, you know, when it came out I think they tried to go to it as when it got re-released a year later, they went to it one more time or something.
Well, they had a pirated copy.
Really? Because when I was reading this morning, they didn't.
No, what I saw in the documentary, they had.
Okay, later on, they must have got.
And they were passing it around house to house.
No, that's of their film.
No, that was the film festival had that. But
yeah.
No, they had a pirated copy that they passed around between them.
Maybe they got that later on, but they did not initially have that, and they made it for 7 years.
Because he said something about he watched that movie like every day for months.
They do crazy things, like they lit themselves on fire to do like the scene when they recreate the scene in the tavern in Nepal. They're in this dude's basement with the basement on fire. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's insane.
They set the walls on fire.
It is so awesome to think that kids were this driven to do a thing that I'd be like, holy shit, this is amazing. It's a fantastic thing to watch. And then the only scene they never finished was the airplane scene. Yeah. And then I guess in 2015, they went and they decided to get back together and finish it. And they got some money together and they ended up finishing this. And they can't... It doesn't stream anywhere, but apparently they take it around and show it places for charity. Steven Spielberg has seen it.
Well, then it's that Butt-Numb-a-thon, which is Harry, what's his face?
Yeah, the guy from Ain't It Cool News, or if that's still a thing, ran it at the Alamo Draft House theater chain in Texas. And director Eli Roth, when he was still just an indie guy, and he saw it. And he took the tape, and a couple weeks after that...
Knowles.
Yeah, a couple weeks after that, he had a meeting at DreamWorks, and not with Spielberg, with somebody else, but he gave the tape to somebody at DreamWorks and said, you know what? You should show this to Mr. Spielberg. It's crazy. These kids... And they showed it. And apparently Spielberg liked it so much that he reached out to Eli Roth and got in contact with them. And there's a photograph on there that he had the three guys... come out to DreamWorks and have a meeting with them just to kind of shake their hands and get a picture or whatever.
It was such an amazing story, and it was exactly what these kids needed at the time, because a lot of them were going through some very troubling times in their personal life, and they just threw themselves into this project to allow them to express the emotional problems they were having, and it really kept them all sane. It was such a beautiful and touching documentary, and such an amazing thing to see the willpower of even 11-year-olds to be able to do this, because I believe they said they filmed for like 6 months or a year and a half or something, and they had to start completely over
because they didn't realize that they were shooting the camera they were shooting on. I guess they just never thought to watch the tape back, but it had like a letter superimposed on there.
It had the letter.
That it was a thing that video cameras at the time would impose titles on sometimes, and they didn't realize they'd shot a whole bunch of stuff with it and had to go back and do it. They bought a truck and gutted the engine out of it and rebuilt it, and they were pushing or towing it with other vehicles, and the kids are climbing on trucks and jumping onto it. Almost getting run over by those cars. I would never have thought to do this when I was a kid. I'm like, these guys are amazing, insane.
Yeah.
But amazing. I wish I could meet these guys to shake their hand now, even as adults. Like, that was awesome, dudes.
Yeah, it was kind of incredible to see when you really want to get something done, or you really want to do something that really nothing's going to stand in your way.
If you're and seeing that is probably why, that's what watching that film, and I always loved the other films, but watching that documentary kind of got into that was kind of why I wanted to do this podcast, that episode. I'm like, I'd love to be able to talk about that, because I wanted to talk about that, but that wasn't, I didn't want to do an entire episode about it, but I just thought it was amazing. If you're a fan of Indiana Jones, by all means, look on Netflix. This thing is worth your time. It's a little over an hour long, but you watch it. You can't, I tell you, they lit themselves and they lit the basement on fire. You have to see it to believe it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's
literally
amazing.
Set the walls on fire.
So many different ways that these kids could have accidentally got maimed or killed, and you go, oh my God, but they didn't, and instead they made this awesome thing. Go watch it, please. Spend a little bit of your time. It's worth it. And I wish, if this ever came through Winnipeg for some reason, or anywhere near that I could get to it, I would absolutely go see this thing.
Yeah. It'd be worth
their own film.
It would be worth $30 for me.
Totally.
For me without issue. I would shill out $30-$40 to go and see this thing actually air, because just some of the, even in the documentary, they show the split screen of the two, the airplane scene in reality and the airplane scene done by the kids, and it's, I mean, you know, granted they're adults now when they do the airplane scene, but even still, I mean, the actor they got to play the big muscle guy
he totally looks
so
just like
close.
that guy. Yeah,
it was amazing, just a real tribute to people who have passion and are willing to follow through with that passion.
And that the original Raiders film did inspire these kids and send them off on this insane journey. So fantastic there. All right, so now I mentioned earlier that this was originally going to be like five, like the series was going to be five. Supposedly they were going to do 5 adventures. They've done 4. I think you could carry it on beyond 5. But what do you think the future of this is? Ben? Do you think do you want to see Harrison Ford do this again?
I want to see him hand it off. I don't want to see him through the whole
on
movie.
Screen.
Yeah, I want to see him. I want to see him basically be like what the Henry Jones character was to him in Last Crusade.
Okay, so you want to see like do you mean like recast his son with a better actor and then carried on like that?
Yes,
that's what you think the future.
I think so. I think maybe, you know, you have he and Marion had another son.
Well, you can even say it's Mutt. You can just change the actor.
I don't want to do that. I want him to have another son and actually be. And he actually names him Indiana. Mm-hmm. You know, he may be referred to as Indiana Jones, but his name is Henry Jones.
Okay.
I would like to see him have a son and name him Indiana, or hell, I don't care, a daughter.
Okay.
And I mean, Indiana could be a girl's name too, right? Like, and let's go from there. And I would like to see it.
And like carry the adventures forward, so now it would progress into like the 60s or the 70s.
Yeah, because I mean,
time frame
would have been like, well, I don't know when about.
Crystal Skull's supposed to be like the 50s.
Is it?
Because when they said, they were kind of like, what they'd said is that the first 3 films were kind of like, I don't know if that really tracks, but it supposedly like they wanted those to be inspired by like the old movie serials of like the 40s, and then they wanted starting with Crystal Skull. It was like, now we're sort of more leaning into like monster type, you know, or alien invasion films of the 50s, and with the communism and the Red Scare. And also Steven Spielberg said he didn't want to do cartoon Nazis anymore. After Schindler's List, he said he could not turn back. He doesn't regret doing it, but he says after doing doing it, he could not then go back and do them as a cartoon again. It just, that flavor could not be in his mouth anymore.
I
could totally see that.
I could respect that. Mm-hmm. I think hearing the progression from you know, 40s adventure to more 50s monster movie, that puts a different spin on Crystal Skull for me now.
Okay.
That puts a little different spin on it.
Do we have a convert here?
Well, I think I need to go. I think I need to go
back and rewatch it and give it
with that mindset,
with that mentality
of 50s monster movie.
I don't know. When I watched it, I did not fully get that, and I was kind of like, I kind of, to me, I thought maybe they're just kind of reaching a little bit, but that's me too. I just might be unaccepting of it.
The first thing that I that popped into my head when you said 50s monster movie is Monsters versus Aliens, right? Just the technology, the feel that movie had, and the shapes and the colors. I see that especially in the nuclear village, you know, that they were in originally. I'm like, okay, no, all right. So now I think I need to go back and watch it again with maybe that mindset.
Okay, but carrying forward, saying a new character.
I'd like to see, yes, because I mean, Harrison's getting old, man. I mean, love him to death.
Yep.
He's getting old, and it's time to, if we want to continue this, or if we don't, we still need to. It's
too big of an intellectual property, and Disney mines intellectual properties. And Lucasfilm is owned by Disney now, and that was the two things, the big things they got, was Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones is the one they haven't done anything with yet.
Another thought would be, and I only say this because I think he's in looks somewhat similar, maybe have something between Last Crusade or before Crystal Skull and after Raiders. I would love to see Bradley Cooper in the role.
Okay, I'll get back to that in 10 seconds here. I would go a different way, like you said, Gordon. I would just like to see the role recast. Again, to harken it back to James Bond, I think Indiana Jones is a bigger character than an actor, and we've only seen Harrison Ford play it so far. But once upon a time, audience had only ever seen Sean Connery play James Bond.
I won't argue any of that.
I would love to, and I don't care if it would mess up timelines. I wish they would just approach any future installments as just one-off adventures that can sort of loosely connect or wink at other entries in the series, but you don't have to sit there and go, this doesn't track and he wouldn't have been there and whatever. So I would like to see it recast with a younger actor and rolled back to set in the 30s and the 40s. I liked that visual aesthetic. If Spielberg doesn't, he's directed everything to date. He's not going to be around forever, and I could see him roll back and just sit beside George Lucas and be a producer on it, and let somebody else direct.
Maybe you find somebody really young, and you go An Adventure Before Raiders.
They can set him in there. I'm not that hung up on making sure it jives as a timeline. I don't really care. But just and I've always said that about the series, and I think that and they don't necessarily have to go back and have him fight Nazis again, but I'm sure there's plenty of ways he can fight. We can have other thugs or other type people, and like you said, go after other kinds of relics, and just have them going after strange magical things or having adventures or whatever. I could see that. Bradley Cooper is a name that I would have attached to, and I did talk about it like in the past if I talked with friends about it. 5 or 6 years ago, I said Bradley Cooper would be a guy that could do it. Now, I think he's almost aging out of the role, as sad as that is to say. If you were going to do, I think, like a Bond thing, you'd want an actor to do, in the reality of the financial reality of studio system, they think they're creating a new thing. They want someone to bank on. So they'd want a new actor they can bank on. I don't know that you can see Bradley Cooper doing 3 or 4 of these. So I think you'd have to get somebody a little bit younger now. He would have been perfect, like I said, 6-7 years ago. Because he has the look.
He's 43, so I mean, okay.
Yeah, you think you're not going to see his first adventure until he's 45. And how old was Harrison Ford when he took the role on? Like 32, 33?
Something in that
So 10 years younger, and Ford cracked out 3 in about 12 years. The real ones. I'm being snotty now, but
three
in
8 years.
3 and 8 years. So yeah. So even if he was in his early 30s, he was just barely past his 40s into his early 40s when he did it.
Yeah.
So you're now going to start Bradley Cooper where Harrison Ford finished.
But I mean, Harrison Ford finished in 2008.
No, we're not counting that one. Not counting old Indy, and not because I'm discounting the film here, but I'm saying if you're playing him as younger.
True. Yes. Yeah. If you're portraying him as younger.
A lot of people throw the name online when you're talking who would they recast. A lot of people throw the name of Chris Pratt, and I love Chris Pratt. And I think that's a spectacularly terrible idea. I think
he's got that little too goofy thing going on.
A little too, well, it could be a different take. I don't want someone to come in and do a Harrison Ford impersonation. They can, that's why I would say having a different director too.
Maybe reimagining.
I don't mind if it shifts a bit, just as this keeps harkening back to James Bond, but they did it. Steven Spielberg said this, it's his fault. But
just a quick interjection.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford was 39.
Really?
When he did the first Indiana Jones.
So he would have been hitting almost 50 when he played him in Last Crusade?
He was born in 42.
Wow, okay.
So, yeah, he would have been 39, and then 8 years later, he would have been 47. Okay. Wow. So
I'd still go a little bit younger, and as of right now, Bradley Cooper just established himself as A-list level director with A Star Is Born, so Bradley Cooper's probably not going to be tying himself down to an Indiana Jones thing and just being just an actor in somebody else's stuff. I think he's going to develop his own projects. Anyways, but back to Chris Pratt. You and I were having a conversation earlier today when we were eating lunch off mic about the idea of actors versus movie stars.
And you brought this up on the podcast.
Yeah, a movie. Yeah, I think I've brought it before. Where a movie star, right now, I think that Chris Pratt is a movie star. That whatever he's in right now, he's Chris Pratt, large font as insert character.
And I think, I'm not sure if we brought this up on mic or if this was a discussion we had off mic. I will say that Passengers was, I think, a bit of a different role, more of him being an actor.
Okay,
but.
Oh my God, I had a spine shiver.
I liked Passengers.
Okay, awesome. Guess what? Put a pin in that. We are having an entire episode about Passengers. Okay, because I passionately dislike it. So we're going to have, pin that now. There's a new episode. Holy, I'm so excited about having the Passengers episode with you now. We're doing that
I'll have to rewatch it.
We're doing that in the early part of the new year. Okay. But I think Chris Pratt, and I love him in stuff, but right now he's that same character in everything right
Absolutely
now.
True.
And not to say that wouldn't work as Indiana Jones, but I guess maybe I just don't want to see that Indiana Jones. Maybe I'm being a bit snotty. I don't know. It's tough to say. I'd almost rather see like an unknown or somebody, a little bit smaller. Financially, I'm sure a studio would like to see somebody a little bit more unknown too, that they can, not have to pay huge dollars right out of the gate. I'm really glad because I heard these horrible things, and sometimes these kind of people annoy me on the internet. When Disney announced that they were doing that Solo, the Solo, a Star Wars story, the Han Solo origin film, I wasn't all that down with the idea, and this has nothing to do with the fact that I think the end product was terrible. People started talking about going, if this is good, they should cast the same actor as young Indiana Jones. I'm like, no, they don't. He's not proto Harrison Ford that he will now take up all his roles. Are we going to go remake Witness with him too? What else? Regarding Henry? Like, no, it's Working Girl? Like, no, he just, because he looks like him, let's give him the same role. No, that's ridiculous. So, yeah, but I don't know. But yeah, I think a younger, maybe an unknown actor and maybe a younger director, and let them have a bit of a different feel, much like the Bond films would shift flavor and tone with different actors and become a different thing of its time. Maybe try something different.
Yeah.
And plus, this is owned by Disney. They can afford to lose money on a few things. They can afford to try and experiment, and if it flops, just put it in a drawer. But
just throwing some names out off the top of my head. Joseph Gordon-Levitt. We talked about him earlier today.
Maybe.
He's not an A-lister, so he's not going to be coming...
Are you saying as an actor or as a director? Because I think he wants to do some directing, too.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just saying as an actor, because he's kind of got that look.
Yeah.
But he's not big money name.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Cox.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Charlie Cox. Now that they canceled Daredevil, he might have some free time on his hands. Mm-hmm. Genre people do tend to like our actors to cross-pollinate into other genre things, and I think you would count Indiana Jones as a genre type thing. It would count into that sort of nerd sphere, if that's a word. Yeah, maybe Charlie Cox has the look. If we're just going for the look, interesting idea. No,
it's just kind of like I said, something that kind of jumped up at me was
that does kind of tickle me. But so you would say that you'd rather see them carry on and move forward in decades?
I don't.
Just,
I'm rather no.
Yeah, no.
I'm just throwing out.
As a possibility.
I would like to see. I would be totally down with a reimagining.
It's not
I would be down
it's not a
with
binary
prequel.
thing. I guess it's not a one or the other.
No,
but
I'd be down with prequel. I'd be down with a continuation of the storyline. I'd be down with a reimagining.
Yeah.
As long as they don't try to remake.
Yeah.
That's all I care.
Oh
about.
yeah, don't reuse an earlier script. We don't need to see a new version of Raiders, a Lost Ark. No, yeah, I would. Like I said, much like the Bond films, I would like to see more adventures just set in the 30s. And like I said, they can just be spiritually connected to other adventures and wink at each other without having to worry about a timeline to trip over. I know a lot of, in the internet age, people tend to freak out about the timelines. I just saw a couple things the other day about people like losing their mind again about the timeline in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm like, how about you just watch the movies and chill about what month it was?
Yeah,
but
that
I'm not like
I'm not that.
I guess some people get hardcore into stuff like that, and I'm sure there'd be people that could point out half a dozen things that I get really insane about in both film and other stuff. But I'm cool with the timelines. I'd like to just see a bunch of one-off adventures with
Sure. I mean,
anything.
You don't even really need to. If you just put year, I mean, we don't really need to date all that specifically.
Yeah. And once I think if you did throw another actor in there, and once it works once, I think then you free it up so they go, let's do 2 or 3 with this guy, and then we'll just restart it with somebody else, and we'll do other things, and
I think that's as you say, it's a genre, and I think it's a genre that hasn't really been. I don't think it's been terribly well done.
Nope.
Outside of Raiders, or Indiana Jones. The Tomb Raider, I had such high hopes for, and the second one was a lot better than the first.
Never saw either of them.
No, the second one
or the new one.
The second one was pretty good, but it I don't know. It was missing something. Like Raiders just had, and Last Crusade and even Temple had these well-rounded feels to them, and they just kind of were all-encompassing that it feels like the rest of these kind of genre ones haven't quite touched on yet, you know. So I'd like to see more people explore this. I kind of miss the days of Armageddon and Deep Impact and, you know, Twister and Tornado, and, you know, like when one studio would come up with an idea that a few months later the other studio would come up with this same
well,
thing,
that comes out of dueling. Hey, they all have, I guess, like, you know, employing that many people, there's leaks and spies and whatnot. So what happens usually is if I'm developing a Meteor movie at my studio, you're like, well, we need one too, or a Volcano movie or whatever. Yeah. So what happens is consequently, often studios will then go around, if I'm developing one, if I'm going to start pushing a Volcano movie, I'll run around town and buy up as many Volcano scripts as I can find to get to prevent other people from getting them. And I can sometimes they combine scripts and cherry pick things out, and sometimes they just flat out just put it in a drawer just so somebody else can't do it. So yeah.
I miss those days. I miss those days where, you know, as ridiculous as it was to be like, really, we're going to have like two asteroid movies in 6 months. But at the same time,
there was a thing too, like, hey, what's their take on it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I wonder who's going to do this one better. You know,
my brain's way off today, so I forgot. This is a trivia thing early too. I'll throw it back. Have you ever caught the multiple layers of the dog connection throughout the series?
The dog connection.
Okay. I'm going to miss some of these and get them wrong, but somebody, you know, you can look these up for yourself. But, okay, they established in the canon of the third film that Indiana was actually the family dog's name, and that his name was Henry Jones Jr., but he liked the name Indiana, so then he called himself Indiana. So he named himself after the dog. When Indiana was actually George Lucas's dog, a name of a dog George Lucas had, a pet dog. And that dog was supposedly also George Lucas's inspiration for Chewbacca. So we're doubling down with a Star Wars tie-in here, too. Willie, the name Willie for Willie Scott in Temple of Doom, Willie was the name of Steven Spielberg's dog. I hope that didn't cause marital problems for them that he married the character he named after his dog, but that was a thing. Then some people,
I had to wonder why they named her Willie, because that was
in the novelization. Her name is Wilhelmina, and she just goes by Willie.
Yeah.
But that's just a thing that just didn't make it into the film.
One, not a great choice. But.
Whatever. Then if you and then now you can carry it forward into Crystal Skull, that some people believe, and I don't think this has ever been corroborated by Steven Spielberg, but that his kid's nickname is Mutt is another throw in and a nod at the constant dog naming thing, that he has nicknamed himself after a dog, not a specific dog, but names himself
just
Mutt.
All these different dogs. So what's the Raiders one then?
I don't. There's not a specific one in there. Other than that, he's Indiana, but it's just a running thing of the character, I guess. Yeah. Star Wars references. There's a lot of Star Wars references. Did you know all the Star Wars references hidden in the background Easter eggy?
Don't think so.
Okay. In the Well of the Souls, you can see it a couple times on camera. In the hieroglyphs in the background, C-3PO and R2-D2 are in the hieroglyphics, supposedly.
I did know that one.
And I think they might also be in the Incan Temple. I could have that. My head might be wrong there, but yeah. And I think they are also somewhere in Last Crusade. The name of the club, do you know the name of the club in the beginning of Temple of Doom? Where Willie Scott sings and where they have that whole opening thing? Yeah. It's Club Obi-Wan. Right on the sign.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And now you can buy online Club Obi-Wan t-shirts and stuff like that.
So funny.
Yeah. There's that. I'm trying to think if there was anything in Crystal Skulls, but I don't recall. No. But yeah, so there's a few little Star Wars Easter eggs. Oh, I think the float plane in the beginning of Raiders, I think its tail number is 3P0.
Oh, I'll have to check.
Yeah, or C3P. Funny. It's some variation on C3PO, but yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, kind of fun little Easter eggs.
Now, is it Austin Powers that does a gag about travel by red line?
I don't recall it.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. There's a movie that is right at the end of my head where they're like,
I don't know
fastest way to travel, and that's by red line. And
I don't recall that. Okay. Yeah, but I would not be surprised. These films have become so ingrained in the culture that the references echoing forward through pop culture. Like I've been talking now about things referencing other stuff, but yeah, it has become so referenced in pop culture. I know there was a Magnum PI episode done aping it like right down to like with the whip and the hat and the whole bit. Just, kind of poking fun at the fact that Tom Selleck almost got cast. I remember there was an episode that the summer that Last Crusade came out, there was an episode of one of my favorite shows, MacGyver, that totally aped it and did a thing. But this, it continues and I think will influence pop culture forever. But anyways, we've been all over the map today because I did make show notes and then forgot to read a lot of them and then just kept jumping around. Like I said, I was at a holiday party last night. I'm giving myself a pass on this. I hope history will look kindly on this episode.
It's also weird that we're down to two.
I'm not gonna say a man short. I originally had slotted a good friend Alex Watkinson to be here today, but he through work and other commitments, it's just been really difficult to schedule him lately, and that's on me. This is just my little fun hobby, and he's been really accommodating all summer with the history of the show being on, and it was just too crazy. But for timing wise, I needed to get one in the can, so we did this as a two-hander. It was an experiment. I think it works better with three. It gave me more time to stall and think on things where I could let the other two guests talk to each other, and anyways, Ben, thanks again for trying this with me and as a two-hander, and I think next time we'll be back to a three-hander, except we may have a real issue on our hand with passengers. Anyways, until next time, why did it have to be snakes?